Welcome everyone to our Who's Afraid of Full Service webinar. I'm Teresa Chang, Marketing Promotion Specialist here at Satori Software and your moderator for the next hour. If you have any questions, please do send them over. You can submit them in the box on your right. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentation, so if we don't get around to answering all of your questions, we'll make sure to follow up with you afterwards. Just a heads up, this webinar will be recorded and will be available on our website shortly after the presentation. All right, so joining us today is Kim Mock, our Postal Product Specialist. Kim has a decade worth of experience in the postal industry and serves as the Intelligent Mail Specialist here at Satori Software. If you have any questions regarding full service, TEM, Postal One, she's definitely the one to talk to. She's presented at MailCom, NPF, and many other educational forums. Welcome, Kim.
Thanks, Teresa.
Since it's the eve of Halloween, we decided a theme is in order. This is the critical time to make the transition to full service if you haven't already started the process. So don't let the darkness that is full service scare you. Kim will cover how you can overcome your fear of migration and provide you with simple steps, treats if you will, to help ensure you get your automation discounts come next year. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Kim to get things started.
Hey, thanks, Teresa. All right, so we actually have quite a bit to cover today. Even with the Halloween theme, what is a little bit of a serious topic, but we want to add a little bit of a fun twist to it today since tomorrow is Halloween. So first we're going to start talking about what's going to happen on January 26, 2014 when full service is going to be required for automation discounts. We're going to talk about what you can expect with your first full service mailing, and we'll talk about all of the requirements that you'll need to satisfy in order to send your mail using full service. We'll also talk a lot about electronic documentation, which is one of the more complex parts of full service, and we'll even go through a little bit about how to select which electronic documentation method it will be right for your company. Then we'll talk about how you'll go ahead and prepare that very first mailing, and then we'll go through a couple tips that we've uncovered as we've transitioned quite a few of our customers over to full service. So first, let's talk about this scary date that's on everyone's calendar. I hope you have your January calendars all printed out and you have January 26th circled in bright red pen, because this is a really important date for all mailers who are getting automation rates today. And the reason that this is such an important date is that this is going to be the date that you will be required to send your mail using full service preparation rather than the printed paperwork that you use today to submit your mailings. Now, we've done quite a few polls with our customers, and also through some industry associations, we've learned that over half of mailers haven't made the transition to full service already. So that's a little bit daunting for service providers like Satori, but also for mailers as well, because as this date gets sooner and sooner and it starts staring at us in the face here, it's going to be a lot more difficult for each mailer to actually make that transition, because the resources that will be available at the post office are going to diminish. They're going to be really, really busy trying to get all of these last mailers through the full service door there. And so we want to make sure that everyone is transitioned early enough so that they have all the resources they need to make that transition successful. We've also learned, talking through this process with some of our customers, that not all USPS personnel are trained fully on full service. There's a lot of misconception both in the mailing industry and within the post office itself as to what's required for full service, when it's required, and how to actually submit those mailings. So I'm going to go through a couple of those misconceptions as we go throughout the session today. Now, not to worry, the USPS is putting together a training program for all of their entry personnel, and they're pushing it out using an online learning system. And so that's being pushed out throughout the country. Unfortunately, the USPS personnel do have quite a bit of time to actually finish that training. So if you start going to full service today, you may wind up knowing a little bit more about full service than your entry clerk does. And that's okay, because we could help you through that process. And the other number that I want you to remember, other than January 26th, is this 88 days. So we've got a countdown on our website that tells you how many days until full service is going to be required. And today that day is 88 days. So you've got just under a quarter to start moving towards full service and start sending your mail that way. So let's talk a little bit about what exactly is going to happen when the clock strikes midnight and full service is going to be required for all mailings starting on January 26th there. So the first thing to remember is that full service is only required for automation rate mailings. So if you're getting automation rates on your letters, flats, or postcards today, then you will be required to migrate over to full service preparation to continue to get those rates starting on January 26th. So if you are getting non-automation rates, or if you're getting carrier out saturation rates, or if you're just doing non-barcoded mail, or even parcels, you would not be required to use full service preparation. It's only those automation rate mailings that apply. Now, for most classes of mail, the difference between the prices for automation rate mail and non-automation rate mail is actually pretty significant. So those numbers there can actually justify themselves. You can actually see right away, if you prepare your mail for non-automation, how much more expensive your mail will be if you don't migrate over to full service. Now, we do anticipate that there is going to be a mad rush at the very end. It's going to be just like the mad rush for candy, that all the trick-or-treaters going in and trying to grab their candy bars. And at the very last minute, we expect that quite a few mailers are actually going to be trying to migrate at the very last minute. They're going to be contacting the post office. They're going to be contacting their service providers and their vendors to try and make that transition at the last minute. And the one thing that we want to recommend is that you, as a mailer, don't wait until the last minute. Now, there are several reasons why some mailers might think that they want to wait until the last minute. There's a misconception in the mailing industry right now that this full service date will be postponed, that it won't be required. We've even heard from some customers that some USPS personnel are telling their customers not to migrate to full service because it will be postponed. I want to crush that myth right away. Full service will be required. We actually have letters from the Postmaster General, his Vice President of Payment and Entry Technology, and several other contacts that we have at the post office that have confirmed in writing that full service will be required on January 26th. So waiting is not really a good strategy at this point, because if this is going to go through, it's better to be on the leading edge than on the trailing edge. It's better to get ready now than to wait. Now, because of all of these people rushing at the very last minute, we do expect that the resources at the post office will be strained. And that's not just the help desk and not just at the business mail entry units. This will also be some of their computer systems like Postal One. So the post office, when you're using electronic documentation, uses a system called Postal One to collate and to collect all the mailing information and the electronic documentation for all the mailings throughout the country. Now, Postal One is a pretty robust system. However, it hasn't been fully tested with every single mailing because not everyone has made that transition to full service. So we expect that those first couple days right after January 26th, you may see that system go down and then come back up and then go back down a couple times, just because the load of people that are going to be accessing it is going to be quite a bit higher than it is today. So be prepared for some delays that very first week after full service is required. So now that we've talked a little bit about what's going to happen on that side of things, let's talk about what you're going to need to make this transition to full service. Really, when you take all of the full service requirements, they boil down to two key requirements. The first is unique barcodes, and then the second is going to be electronic documentation. Now, when you do submit your mailing to the post office, they're going to do the validation just like they do today. So they're going to make sure that the piece type is correct for the rates that you're sending, that the size is correct, that the flexibility of the piece is compatible with the automation equipment, that all the barcodes are readable, and also that you have electronic documentation submitted in Postal One. And as long as you pass all of those validations, so the validations that you go through today, if you get your mail run through the Merlin machine, it'll continue to go through that Merlin machine after January 26th. But in addition to those validations that exist today, they'll be checking that the barcodes are readable and also that your electronic documentation exists. There are some additional validations that they'll be checking later on, but for January, they're just sticking with those two main items. So here's the time for you to grab your flashlight so you can actually see what's going on in this haunted house of full service here. And the first step is to get ready now. So if you wanted to go and investigate a haunted house, you wouldn't go in without a flashlight, without maybe your cell phone so that you could call for help, and maybe a couple backups there. And so the same is true for full service. You want to make sure that you have the tools that are going to be necessary and that you're really prepared for this transition. So the one thing that we do want to recommend is that all mailers make this transition and send their very first full service mailing before Thanksgiving. And the reason that we chose that date is, first, it gives you a couple weeks from today to actually make that full transition. And also, it's going to make sure that you have everything in place so that when January 26th comes, you're going to be ready for that date. You're going to have plenty of experience sending full service mail. You're going to have a good working relationship with your business mail entry personnel, and everything's going to be working seamlessly, where those people who are going to wait, they're going to be scrambling at that last minute, and maybe they don't have all the pieces to get their full service mailings together. So the other thing to remember is that there are going to be some ways to be able to adapt to this new system. So again, like I said before, the additional validations for full service, checking barcode uniqueness and things like that, actually aren't going to start until July. However, we do want to recommend that you start those practices early so you can get into the habit of making sure that your barcodes are unique. Now, you do always have the option when you submit a mailing to the post office that if one of the validations fails, maybe the piece is too large or your electronic documentation wasn't submitted properly, you always have the option to take that mail back, rework it, and resubmit it. And that is not going to change with full service. Another option that the post office is enacting that allows mailers just a little bit of flexibility when adopting this new process is they're basically giving a 3 strikes you're out rule. So starting on January 26th, if the very first mailing that you do for automation rates doesn't actually qualify for full service, so say for example your barcodes aren't readable or your electronic documentation wasn't formatted correctly, then they're going to give you a pass on that mailing, and they'll give you an additional 2 passes as well. So you'll have 3 mailings that you'll be able to send without the full service preparation, and you'll still be able to get automation rates on those first 3 mailings. Now, those 3 mailings are for all time and eternity, so you don't get 3 mailings per year. It's just 3 mailings, period. And as soon as you've used up those 3 mailings, then you will need to use proper full service preparation in order to submit your mail. So again, those 2 main requirements that you'll need to satisfy in order to mail your your SEP full service is going to be unique barcodes and also electronic documentation. So let's talk a little bit about those. So the first thing that we talk a lot about is barcode uniqueness. Now, what that means is there's actually 3 different types of barcodes that are available in the full service intelligent mail system. If you're sending automation rates today, then you are already using the intelligent mail piece barcode. However, you may not be using the unique serial number field that's part of that barcode. So you'll have that barcode that's on the mail piece, and it'll look very similar to the barcode that you're using today. In addition to that piece barcode, there's also a new barcode type that's printed on your tray and your sack labels. And this gives a little bit more information about each tray and sack that's available in the USPS mail stream. Also, if you put your mail on pallets, rolling stock, those cages, APCs, Gaylords, or any other large container, then you will be required to print out a pallet placard. And that pallet placard in full service also has an intelligent mail barcode that's attached to it. Now, each of these barcodes have similar elements, even though the barcodes themselves look very different. Each of these barcodes contains information about who you are as the mailer, and that's called your mailer ID. It also includes information about where that piece or tray or pallet is headed, so it contains destination information. And then the key part of this for full service is it also includes a unique number called a serial number. So again, if you're using the basic intelligent mail barcode today, you're likely not using that serial number field. However, for full service, you will be required to use that field and make sure that that serial number is unique for at least 45 days. And the reason that the post office is requiring this is because they want to be able to identify every single mail piece, tray, sack, pallet, Gaylord, rolling stock, all of that stuff. They want to be able to identify each one in the mail stream uniquely. So each of these barcodes basically becomes a license plate for that piece of mail, that tray, or that pallet. So, in order to do that, you need to make sure that those barcodes are unique, and that's why we use that serial number field. So let's talk a little bit about how you'll satisfy this requirement in your day-to-day operations here. Now, most software products that are out on the market today have a uniqueness element to them that allows you to track the barcodes that are part of your mailings across all of your mailings. And basically what it'll do is it'll make sure that your barcodes are unique for at least 45 days. Now, for Satori software products, we do have a uniqueness tracking system in Bulk Mailer, Satori Architect, and Satori Office, and we're in the process of adding that functionality to the Postal Soft Pre-Sort technology as well, and that'll be available before the January 26th requirement there. So if you see down in the lower right-hand corner there, you'll see a little selection there for barcode uniqueness, and if you select the automatic method, then that will automatically track all of the intelligent mail barcodes that are generated and your mailer IDs. So it'll make sure that the combination of your mailer ID and that serial number is going to stay unique for at least 45 days. Now, the important thing to remember is that the post office won't be penalizing you for uniqueness errors right away. So right now, they're already tracking this uniqueness information. However, you won't be hit with any charges. Your mailing won't be rejected if you have a uniqueness error starting in January. However, in July, they've intended to start invoicing customers, which is kind of a new thing. So basically what they're going to do is they're going to measure all of your mailings across a calendar month. And if you have duplicate serial numbers for your mailer ID within that month, then they're going to count those. And if the percentage of errors that occur for all of your mailings is over a certain threshold, then they will send you an invoice. So that's going to be kind of a new thing that they're going to start here in July. Now, there is a way that you can start tracking this information now. if you're sending full-service mail today, you have access to a report called the Mailer Scorecard, and that's a mailing report that's available inside the Business Customer Gateway. You can access that report today to see how well you're doing with your uniqueness, and we do recommend that you start getting familiar with your Mailer Scorecard. And what that will do is that allows you to track how well you're doing with the uniqueness and all of the other full-service requirements that they'll be checking in July. And we recommend that you try and keep your errors under 2% for each of the different levels. The post office hasn't announced what the thresholds will be for each error, but we anticipate that they'll be somewhere between the 2 to 5% range. So let's talk a little bit about the second requirement for full service, and that's electronic documentation. So basically, what electronic documentation is it is an electronic version of all of the printed paperwork that you take to the post office with you today. So that's your postage statement, your qualification reports, your bundle reports if you're sending periodicals mail, and any of those additional reports that you would need in order to submit your mail today. You can put those all together in an electronic package, and then you send those off to Postal One, which is that USPS database that we were talking about. Now, one of the scary things about electronic documentation is there's actually 3 different ways to satisfy this requirement. And we'll talk a little bit here in a minute about how you would select which method you'll choose. It's not as scary, and it's not as gray as it might appear on the surface. Probably the scariest thing with electronic documentation, though, is it does require that you modify your mailing process. Where today you would print out your paperwork and maybe a couple days later take it down to the post office with your mail to get verified. You do need to submit this information to Postal One before you take your mail down to the post office, and so it does require a change in your mailing process. So you will have to modify any scripts that you have available. So for electronic documentation, it's important to note that most pre-sort technology that's on the market today already has an electronic documentation portion included with it. Depending on your software product, that may be available through an add-on, or it may be available free. So you should definitely check with your software provider to see whether you have that functionality available or whether you'll need to purchase an additional add-on there. The next thing that you'll need in order to properly populate your electronic documentation is information called MIDs and CRIDs, and that's your mailer IDs and your customer registration IDs. And basically what those numbers are is there's numbers that identify you to the post office, and if you're mailing for another entity, for a mail owner, it identifies that mail owner as well. So if you're a mail service provider and you provide mailing services for many companies, you will be required to identify your customers using a MID or a CRID. Now, the way to do that today is actually you can request MIDs and CRIDs for all of your customers directly from the Business Customer Gateway. So if you see the link that's down at the bottom of the screen here, you'll see this is actually a page out of the Business Customer Gateway. If you click on the Manage Account link, you'll see this way down at the bottom. And if you're signed up as a mail service provider, then you'll see this section here. And you can click the link there to get the MIDs and CRIDs, and it allows you to upload an Excel spreadsheet, for example, of all of your customers, and then it will append the MIDs and CRIDs to that Excel spreadsheet. So you'll have all that information about your customers, and you can start mailing for them. So the process for getting mailer IDs and CRIDs has been simplified greatly, which is really good news. You will want to make sure that the mailer IDs and CRIDs and also the permit information that you enter in your software is correct, because as soon as you upload your electronic documentation to Postal One, they will validate this information. So you want to make sure that everything gets typed in correctly. So let's talk about one of the scarier topics with eDoc, which is where do I start? Which method do I choose? I have these 3 different options. Why would I choose one over the other? Now, we have done entire webinars on this topic, and you can access the recordings of those webinars on our website. But I want to boil this down to the absolute nitty-gritty here. And really there are 3 different options, and there are 3 different reasons for selecting which one that you want to use. Now, if you're a pretty small mailer and you only ever send mailings that are less than 10,000 pieces, then you can use the Postal Wizard. The Postal Wizard is basically a website where you'll type in all the information from your postage statement directly into Postal One. And it is a very manual process. However, it is very straightforward, and you don't have to save any files or keep track of anything, and it's pretty straightforward. However, it does have some limitations. The first is for each mailing that's submitted to the Postal Wizard, if you're using full service, it is limited to 10,000 pieces. So if you ever have a mailing that's over 10,000 pieces, you would not be able to use the Postal Wizard for it. Another limitation of the Postal Wizard that's actually not commonly known is if you have both an automation part of your mail and a non-automation part of your mail, you actually have to split those out if you're using full service. So if you select full service in the Postal Wizard, it will only allow you to enter your automation rate mail, and then your non-automation rate mail would be a separate mailing, which won't work for some customers, because if you have, say, 150 pieces left over after a standard mail mailing, and you have all of those mailed out at non-automation rates, that's not going to meet the requirements for actually creating a full standard mail mailing, and so you would not be able to claim those non-automation rates as it was a separate mailing. So if you have any complexity to your mailings like that, or you have quite a few non-automation pieces, or if you do manifesting or anything that requires a qualification report, then you would not be able to use the Postal Wizard. But if you're doing small, very non-complex mailings, then the Postal Wizard is the right solution for you. So the next option for electronic documentation is Mail.XML. And Mail.XML is a relatively new technology. However, there are some advanced software packages like our bulk mailer product that do support Mail.XML. And it's a very easy way for you to submit your mailing documentation directly to the post office. There are no limits to the size or the complexity of the mailings that you send. However, there are some limitations in the editing and other post-pre-sort technology that you can actually use with Mail.XML. But if you're just going to be pre-sorting your mail, submitting it to the post office, and then maybe you have a couple things that you change right after you've prepared that documentation, maybe you only change the mailing date or the piece weight, then Mail.XML is a really good solution for you. However, if you have some pretty complex things that you do with your mailing, say for example, you send that information out to a logistics provider or a consolidator, or if you need to change the number of pieces in a tray or manage spoilage, or you want to co-pallet your mail, or anything along those lines, then Mail.dat is going to be the best solution for you. Mail.dat is basically a database that allows you to report on all the information that's about your mailing, and it's very easy to use when you're working with another company to actually send that mail, or if you need to make some more complex changes to the content of your mail before you send it out. So basically you have the 3 different options. If you've got your small, simple mailings, use Postal Wizard. If you only make small changes but you've got larger mailings, then you can use Mail.XML, and otherwise you would use Mail.dat. So the next topic that I want to talk about is TEM, which stands for the Test Environment for Mailers. And this actually has been a pretty big hurdle in the road to full service. And basically what's happened is just in the last month or so, the post office has simplified this process greatly. So it used to be that if you were using Mail.XML or Mail.dat, you had to go through a very extensive testing process called TEM with the post office. Now, the post office was starting to realize that they had a lot of mailers that they needed to onboard onto full service, and going through and manually checking each and every single mailer was just not going to be a viable solution for them. So what they did was first they started out with the software providers, and they started certifying software providers for their electronic documentation. So basically they came to software providers like Satori software and tested their implementation of Mail.dat and Mail.XML if they supported it. So now what they've done is they've actually removed this requirement at the mailer level. So if you're using an approved software product, you do not have to complete TEM, at least through the USPS side. They're not going to check your mailings in TEM. They're not going to validate anything unless you ask them to, which makes things very streamlined because you actually don't have to involve the USPS in that process. However, we do actually strongly recommend that you use the test environment for mailers as a testing sandbox to make sure, just on your side, that you have everything set up properly. So what you can do to do this is you can set up your software to submit directly to TEM, and then you can validate your results in TEM without actually sending a live mailing. And the reason that we strongly recommend that you do use TEM, even if you're not going through the official testing process where the post office validates all of your information, what this does is it allows you to make sure that your postage statement and qualification reports are going to show up properly on Postal One to make sure that it's going to match what's in your software. And also that all of your mailer IDs and CRIDs were entered properly when you entered your software. It's a lot better to make sure that all of this information is correct in a test environment than when you actually have a live mailing and you want to make sure it's entered correctly at the dock. So we do strongly recommend that you use the TEM system. However, it is not a requirement anymore to qualify for full service if you're using approved software, and you don't need to wait for the USPS to validate that mail. So that has streamlined the process tremendously. So let's talk a little bit about how you'll make this transition to full service. The first thing that you'll want to do is notify your contacts at the post office. Talk to your entry personnel, see if they're familiar with the process, see if they have any tips for you. Maybe there's something at your local level that can provide some additional help for you. But let them know now that you are going to be moving to full service and that you want to make this as smooth a transition as possible. The next thing you'll do is you'll activate the areas in your software that are required for full service. So you'll make sure that you're sending out those unique barcodes. You'll make sure that you're generating the correct information to generate your electronic documentation. And if you're using Mail.dat or Mail.XML, we do, again, strongly recommend that you use TEM just to validate that everything's formatted correctly and that everything's working properly there. Then what you'll do is you'll actually get, when you submit your electronic documentation, you will get a job ID from Postal One. This is usually a 6 to 10 character just number, and so it's usually numbers and letters all combined there, and it identifies your unique mailing inside of Postal One. So you'll take that job ID, and for your first mailing, we actually recommend that you take your printed paperwork as well, just to make sure that there are no additional problems. So you'll prepare your mailing, you'll submit your electronic documentation to the production Postal One server, and then you'll print out your paperwork and take that along with the job ID down to the post office. Now be prepared, the first time you do this, there may be some issues. There may be some problems with the way that things are formatted, or maybe it doesn't show up properly in Postal One. Be prepared to be flexible and make some adjustments just to make sure that everything is working properly. But you should be able to get all that mail ready and get it submitted, and you should be able to complete your first full service mailing before Thanksgiving. So let's talk a little bit about what's going to happen after this ominous January 26th date. So in addition to the verifications that are going to be run starting in January, there is another deadline, which is going to be July of 2014. And like I said before, the post office does intend to start checking more of the requirements for full service starting in July. So that's making sure your barcodes are unique, that the mailer IDs and the customer registration IDs that you enter are valid, and that you're using them properly inside of your electronic documentation. So they'll also be verifying that the service type IDs that are included in your piece barcodes are correct as well. And so if there are any problems with those starting in July and they're over the thresholds, the defined thresholds for full service there, then you will get an invoice from the post office. The amounts actually haven't been set, but basically we've been told that it will basically be the difference between the automation and the non-automation rate for the amount of mail that was over the threshold. So if there was a 5% threshold and you had 7% errors, then you would be charged 2% of your mailing for the difference between the automation and the non-automation rate. So that's actually a pretty significant charge that can be charged to your company. So we do recommend that you start monitoring your mailer scorecard now, because those numbers are already being calculated even though you're not being invoiced. So again, you can access that mailer scorecard by going into the Business Customer Gateway, clicking on Mail Reports, and then accessing your mailer scorecard. So how do we have the happy ending here? How do we come home with a nice bag full of treats and we've had a good successful time with full service? Again, I can't stress enough how important it is that you start down the full service path today. You can start activating some of the areas in your software today that will activate full service for you. You can start creating unique barcodes today. If you have electronic documentation information inside your software, then you can start using that today as well. You can start these processes today, and you don't have to wait. Quite a few software providers that are on the market today do have some training that's available, and Teresa will be talking about that here in just a minute. But there is some training that will allow you to get walked through this entire process using the software that you're using. And again, we do want to recommend that you complete your first full service mailing by Thanksgiving. That's actually about 4 weeks away. So you've got about 4 weeks to try and get your first full service mailing out the door, and then you'll be definitely on track for full service success. All right. Okay, so I'll go ahead and talk a little bit more about the training that's available. So Satori Software has actually put together a comprehensive training solution called Mastering Full Service. And basically what this is this is an online class that you'll be able to access on your own time. And it's basically like a college level class for full service. It talks about everything that we talked about today, all of the dates and how things are going to be managed, but it also walks you through creating a Business Customer Gateway account, accessing all the reports from Postal One, going through the TEM process, and it even walks you through exactly how to activate the portions of your software that are required to send that full service mailing. So if you're interested in this training program, you can access it right now on our website. And it's available if you go to the Learn section from our main website. There's a link there for Mastering Full Service. And so if you haven't, go ahead and check that out. And we think that's a really good resource for you to learn a lot more about Intelligent Mail Full Service. Okay. And then also there are some additional resources that you can access here. So the first is that we do have some additional resources that are free on our website, so you can access. We have a white paper and additional information that's all available in that Learn section on our website. If you want the gruesome details from the post office, you can access them all at the RIBS website. That's RIBBS at .usps.gov, and there are quite a few pages and pages and pages of information there. Some of it gets pretty technical, but it's all there available on the RIBS website. If you haven't already, you should definitely have your mailer ID, and you can also access your customer registration ID or your CRID. They're on the Gateway website, gateway.usps.com. And then if you want to take a look at your piece barcodes, you want to encode them and decode them to make sure that they're correct, there is an encoder tool that's available on the post office website as well. And with that, I'll send it back to Teresa.
All right, great. Thanks, Kim, for taking the time to talk to us about full service, what available resources are out there, and really reassuring our listeners that full service really isn't all that scary. Before we jump into Q&A, I would like to mention that our next webinar, Handle the 2014 Price Increase with Confidence, is scheduled for November 6th. Learn about the price adjustments that are coming up next year and how this will impact your mailing operations going forward. So definitely check this out. You can register for, you could reserve your seat on our website, on our webinars page. And also, if you have, let's see, so it looks like we have a bunch of great questions. We'll try to get through as many of them as we can, but for any questions you have that you haven't submitted, there is still time. You can do that throughout the Q&A portion of this webinar. If you have any questions after the webinar session, feel free to contact our knowledgeable support team by phone or by email, and all that information is listed on the screen in front of you. And with that, let's go ahead and open it up for questions. So how do we determine if our barcodes are readable?
Okay, so if you're already preparing your Intelligent Mail basic barcodes today, then you're pretty well assured that your piece barcodes are already readable. Probably the easiest way to just verify that this is true is actually just to print out some samples. So if you have some samples from an old mailing, or if you just want to print out some sample pieces, then you can just take those down to your local post office and have them run them through the machines. I also recommend that in addition to the piece barcodes, that you also have them scan a few tray or pallet barcodes as well if you use pallets, because that will make sure that, that those barcodes are readable as well. So usually the easiest way is to just print out a couple copies, take them down to the post office, and make sure that they scan them using their equipment. There are a few hardware products that are out on the market today that do scan these barcodes and do a report based on their readability. However, they're not required. They do cost a couple $100s. But so you can either have the USPS do it, or you can buy some equipment just to make sure that they're readable.
All right. So the next question is, can you show how to submit eDoc using Satori?
That's actually a pretty complicated question. We have several different mailing products that are available, and each of them uses electronic documentation in a different way. So, so depending on the product that you're using and which electronic documentation method you're using, we could spend several webinars actually going through how to do electronic documentation using Satori software products. However, we do have all of that information as part of that full service, Mastering Full Service course that's available on our website. So, so you can access that, and it actually has videos of how to activate the different ways to do electronic documentation based on the product that you're using today.
All right. Will the post office send a report even if the mailing gets passed as a strike against the company?
Yeah, you will, all of the information that you start sending starting on January 26th will start getting reported on. So basically what will happen is if you take your first mailing in on January 26th and there's some type of a problem with your full service verification, they will give you the option to take that mail back and rework it. But if you opt not to do that, then you will be, that will be considered one of your strikes, and so that will be marked as one of the errors that you have, and any of the mail that you send out as part of that mailing will be embedded into the mailer scorecard information for all of the other information there as well.
All right. Does Satori make my barcodes unique, or is there something I have to do to ensure that they are unique for 45 days?
And again, this has to do a little bit more to do with the product that you're using. If you're using the bulk mailer product or Satori Architect or Satori Office, there is a uniqueness option that's available on the Intelligent Mail settings page. If you select the uniqueness option to automatic, then we will keep track of all the serial numbers for you across all your mailer IDs and make sure that those are unique for at least 45 days. We actually try and stretch that out for as long as we can. And however, right now, today, we do not have that availability in our PostalSoft Presort product, but we will be enabling that before the January release.
All right. What is required for non-automation?
So for non-automation, basically, that's if you're already doing automation rates today, the only difference between automation and non-automation is you just won't be selecting the automation option in your software. And you can prepare the mail exactly as you do today. However, the only other thing is you wouldn't be required to print a barcode on every piece. We do recommend that you print the barcode anyway. It just makes it easier for the post office to process that mail. But if you do want to opt for the non-automation rates, you just don't select that option in your wizard.
All right. This is a good question. How important is the date stamp on the mail and the date of the report sent to Postal One?
Well, there's the date that's stamped on the mail. So if you're doing a metered mailing, then that date does identify which date that you're actually paying for that mailing. So if you're doing a metered mail, then it is actually pretty important. But the date that's actually stamped on the mail piece, otherwise you wouldn't have a date if you're not doing metered mail. However, for your mailing reports, it is important to make sure that the mailing date that you enter in your mailing reports is correct. Now, we did push out a service pack just last week that allows you in the bulk mailer products to actually change that mailing date. If you're using Mail.dat or Mail.XML, you'll be able to easily edit that date before you send it off to Postal One.
All right. Good to know. We have a mail house that picks up our mail daily. Should we send a printed report with them anyway?
That really depends on the mail house. So you'll want to contact them and ask what they would prefer. They may prefer that you prepare a Mail.dat file for them and send that over instead of the printed paperwork, but that's really up to them.
Okay. Can we make tray number changes in Mail.XML?
Right now, today, in the Satori implementations of Mail.XML, the tray number changes are not available. So if you need to make changes to the number of trays that you're going to be submitting, you would need to use Mail.dat.
Okay, here's a question about Mail.dat. Can Mail.dat handle both automated and non-automated mail in the same mailing?
Yes, both Mail.dat and Mail.XML can combine both automated and non-automation mail in the same mailing.
Do I need MIDs or CRIDs for customers who own multiple franchises?
Well, it depends on how you're sending the mail. So if you have, if you're mailing for a company that has several franchises, and you're sending a separate mailing for each franchise, then yes, you would be required to actually send that out as a separate CRID. But if you are doing one mailing for the entire corporation and it's not a separate one for each franchise, then you would not need a separate CRID for that company.
Okay, the next question. You mentioned that entry clerks aren't fully trained just yet, but that they're taking on online training program as a training system. Will this training be available to customers and mailers via RIDS or USPS.com?
Unfortunately, no. So this is actually something that's internal to the USPS because there are a lot of additional options and things like that that are available to the clerks that you as the public wouldn't see. So the training is very specific to them and their environment and how they would be viewing the information in Postal One. I'll also know that quite a bit of the information that's in that is fairly technical, so it may be a little bit, it wouldn't be specific to your product, and it wouldn't tell you how to actually enact the full service inside of the mailing product that you're using today. It would only tell you a little bit about Postal One. If you are interested in additional training, that I do recommend that online training course that we've provided that is product specific, and it tells you both how to access the customer side of Postal One and also how to enable full service inside your product.
Can I drop off a full service mailing at any post office?
It depends. This is actually another one where it's a little bit tricky. The post office is trying to roll out a program called Mail Anywhere that allows you to drop your mailing off at any post office. However, today that program has not been officially released, so you would be required to drop your mailing off at the location where you hold your permit, just like you do today.
All right, here's a question. I cannot get into the webinar until halfway through. Will this, where will it be, where will I be able to access the recording? The recording is being recorded at this moment, and it will be available on our website. You just have to go to the Learn section, and under that Learn section, there's a archived sessions page, and you'll be able to access this session there. See, how soon does the mailing need to be submitted before taking the mailing to the post office?
So for when you're submitting your electronic documentation, the recommendation is that you submit that to Postal One at least 2 hours before you're actually going to arrive at the post office. So you could submit it anywhere from, as soon as you've got it all ready to go, all the way up until 2 hours before you're ready to head off to the post office.
How long does the approval process take for full service?
So this is kind of an interesting question because there's actually not an approval process anymore. It's basically the same acceptance procedures that you have today. So rather than having to go through the test environment for mailers and wait for the post office to validate your electronic documentation in TEM, all of that stuff is actually no longer required for full service. And so, so there's actually not a validation procedure anymore. You will actually just be taking your mail down like you do today, but without the printed paperwork. They will do a couple extra checks when you're actually at the dock, and the extra time that would be required for that area actually is going to depend on your facility and how prepared they are for full service. So definitely, if you're at a smaller facility, and then you would want to build in a little bit of time the first couple times you've done your full service mailings, just to make sure that you do have the time to make sure that's submitted. But there's actually no official approval process anymore.
Okay. If I have small mailing customers who only mail once a year, do I still need to get mid and crids? Is there workarounds for small mailers?
So the post office has said that that you would not be required to get a mid or a crid if your mailings are under 5,000 pieces. So you would be able to specify your own mailer ID or crid for mailings under 5,000 pieces.
So we do a lot of overnight drops for our periodical customers, which requires that we pre-sort each city for the mailing labels and then do one statement with all the cities combined. This causes an issue with the customer and label barcode uniqueness. This is a long one. Do you know if USPS is going to take overnight drops into consideration, and after their the registration for full service on this, or will our clients need to either have a statement done for each city or no longer utilize overnight drop options?
Okay, this is a pretty complex question. So, so this one I would definitely check in with the post office and see what they prefer. But if you're doing something where you're actually separating your mail out and then creating a combined statement, then actually a thing that might be a good option for you is to start looking at post pre-sort software that allows you to combine multiple city drops into one mailing and then create one statement based off of that. The post office unfortunately has not actually thought of every single variant on full service yet, so we're still finding a lot of chinks in the armor, so to speak, when it comes to the post office's readiness for full service. But I would strongly recommend that you do contact your post office and see what they prefer. My recommendation would be to actually prepare each of them as a separate mailing.
Okay, the next one we have is that a bug in the USPS Postal Wizard program that non-automation pieces can't be entered? Do they offer both non-automation and automation in the basic IMB Postal Wizard?
Yeah, and actually the post office has said that it is not a bug, and the reason for that is because they claim that full service means automation. And so if you're claiming a full service mailing, then you would only have automation pieces in that mailing. So it's a little bit confusing about the way that they've architected their logic around that, but as far as I can tell, there isn't an intent to add non-automation to the full service area of the Postal Wizard. Today, for the basic intelligent mail barcodes, you can combine those in the same statement.
All right, and here's one for Postal One. Does Satori software submit to Postal One, or is that a separate website? And has Satori Bulk Mailer Professional been TEM approved or certified?
Yes, so we do have an option in the bulk mailer products that allows you to submit Mail.XML, and that will submit either to the production site for TEM or production site or TEM based on your settings in the software. So you can select whether you want to submit a production mailing or submit a test mailing to TEM. Also, we have gone through the TEM certification process for all of our products. Right now, the only product that's not listed on the official USPS list today is our bulk mailer standard product. That's actually an error that we're trying to rectify with the post office. We've been tested, but for some reason they haven't added us to the list. So all of our products are TEM approved.
Okay. Let's see. Ooh, this is a good one. Can you shed some light on ghost permits? Are they required for full service?
Oh, this is another good question. So unfortunately, one of the problems with the way that the post office has implemented full service is it does require, in Postal One, on the non-full service side of it, in order for the mail owner to be properly populated on the postage statement, it does require a ghost permit. And I've talked several times with the post office and expressed that this is not an acceptable answer, but they unfortunately are not going to be able to fix this before the January 26th date. So if you send out mail for mail owners and you want to make sure that they're properly entered in that mail owner area on the postage statement on Postal One, then you would need to get a ghost number for them.
All right, so it looks like we are at the top of the hour, and we have a lot of great questions still coming in. We'll spend a few more minutes answering a few more, and then we'll do a wrap-up. Here's another one. How much does your full service training cost?
And that actually depends on the product that you use today. So you can access all of the prices just by logging into that area on our website. If you go to the training link there, then you'll be able to see all the prices, and it's just based off the product because each one has its own complexity.
Okay. Do you have suggestions as to how to get our questions on Mail.dat answered from the post office? They have provided some information, but said to contact our local post office for additional information. However, our local post office isn't up to speed on the information I need.
And unfortunately, I think this is pretty endemic across the entire post office. There's everybody at headquarters knows what they know, but they push a lot of the questions off to the local post offices, and not everybody at the local post offices are trained, especially in places where there's a lot of rotating personnel. So if you get stuck on a problem, if you have an error in the Mail.dat that you're sending or anything like that, I would suggest that you actually call Satori's software support, because our tech support is very well trained on full service, on intelligent mail, on all the different types of electronic documentation that are available, and in many cases they can be a lot better trained than some of the local personnel at smaller USPS offices. So if you get stuck with that, please give us a call and we can try and expedite that question for you.
Okay. Here's another one about the eDoc methods. Can customers use Mail.dat for everything, or do they have to use one of the other ways for specific mailings?
Actually, that's a great question. We actually recommend that you select one method and just stick with that one method. It's just a lot easier. That way you don't have to keep track of which mailing was submitted via XML versus Mail.dat versus a postal wizard, and everything is just using one process. It just keeps things a lot simpler. So if you need to use Mail.dat for most of your mailings, I would just say use it for all of them. It's just a lot simpler.
And if my customer doesn't have a MID or a CRID, can I just use my own?
If your customer is mailing a mailing that's under 5,000 pieces, then you can use your own. If the mailing is over 5,000 pieces, then you do need to get a MID or a CRID for that customer.
Do all post offices accept full service mail, even if they are smaller town post offices?
They should. So any post office that accepts automation rate mail today should be accepting full service mail.
See, so when bringing mail to the post office, will they require any paperwork or information since the postage summary and reports are electronic?
So what you'll need is when you submit your mailing using electronic documentation, you're going to get a number called a job ID. And the job ID is an ID that the post office will use to look up your electronic documentation in Postal One. So other than your printed paperwork, you would instead just bring that job ID into the post office. If you're using the Postal Wizard, the post office actually prints out a report that has a barcode on it that allows you to, then it has that job ID as part of the barcode. However, that barcode the post office hasn't given out to the software providers, so we can't provide that for XML or Mail.dat. In Bulk Mailer, we do generate a report with that job ID on it without the barcode that for Mail.XML, and for Mail.dat, that's actually part of the USPS system as well. So you would be able to just take that job ID down with your mailing to the post office.
Okay. And we have a clarifying question here. Mailings under 5,000 do not need all the full service requirements, but these mailings can still get automation rates. With the intelligent mail barcoding.
So the only requirement that is not a requirement for mailings under 5,000 pieces is that you have a mailer ID and a CRID for the customer. So all of the other requirements for full service apply to those 5,000 pieces or less mailings. You will need to make sure that you have the unique barcodes. You will need to make sure that you submit electronic documentation, and you need to have at least one mailer ID and CRID for that mailing, but it can be the mailing agents. It doesn't have to be the mail owners. Other than that, all of the rules are the same. The only difference is the mail owner doesn't have to have a MID or a CRID.
Okay. And this will be our last question. Who is the identifier in the verification facility process in Bulk Mailer, and where can I get, and where to get this info?
Okay, so the verification ID that you submit, that you enter in as part of your electronic documentation is actually your customer registration ID. So, so you would just enter your CRID in that verification ID field.
All right, so with that being our last question, we'll definitely follow up on any additional questions that come in offline and make sure that you're followed up on. So with that said, that's all the time we have for this webinar. I would like to note a couple of things before we wrap up. After the presentation, please take a few minutes and complete our short survey. Your feedback will help us improve the quality of our webinars going forward. And as a reminder to everyone, this webinar is being recorded and will be available shortly on our website in addition to the presentation that you see in front of you. You can find this session and the PowerPoint slide deck along with our many other recordings on our Archive Sessions page under the Learn tab on our website. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we hope you have a great rest of the day and a happy Halloween.